Hola, hola, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the opening of this XR Fest, or virtual, immersive and augmented reality space, in name of Carmen Mornes, General Manager of Telefónica Foundation, who couldn't make it in the last moment. She sent me here. I'm responsible for programming the Telefónica Foundation space and XR space, so I work happily with that amazing team. If you follow our programming, you know that we do this in cooperation with a great team, which was also for this XR Fest with the British Council, which has an amazing team as well, headed by Ludovic, who I said I was going to be quite brief. Ludovic was saying that this was the best place for this first festival of virtual, immersive, etc. realities, because here was the first place in Spain where cultural events happened back in 2015 in cooperation with our colleagues and loyal allies from Update, with whom we could have not been able to do this festival. So thank you so much to you guys as well and your team. Since 2016 as well, we inaugurated the XR space on the 4th floor. It's always there, and you can see for free virtual reality content for everyone with educational purposes. And the next step was to organize this fest with the best allies. As I was saying, we hope to do it all over again in future years, which will be an appointment for springtime, more or less around this time. So we will be repeating the festival, and we hope for this to be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I'm not going to say a lot more. You all are aware of the programming of Telefónica Foundation Space, our special interest on technology and this type of activities. I believe I thanked everyone. No one was left out, but I repeat again, British Update, everyone here, all participants for this week. And I believe that's about it. My colleague Elena Gonzalez de la Fuente, who was the one that responsible for everything that is right this week. If something goes wrong, it's my fault, but if it's right, it's Elena's fault. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Annie McKay, who's the director of British Council, who's going to tell us a few words. And as I was saying before, without whom this amazing programming we have for the whole week would not be possible. So thank you all for being here, and we hope to see you here every day between today and Friday, last thing in the morning. Good afternoon, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here and to be able to thank the foundation team. They work so careful for so long with our team to prepare this festival. And today we are gathered with a theme that is passionate and worrying for the future, a future that, depending on your point of view, we consider to be uncertain or full of hope, dark or bright, closed or open. But we know that at the end of the day, nothing is so radical. The future is the main theme for this festival, devoted to immersive realities. These technologies that just a few years ago seemed science fiction, and that nowadays are changing education and arts, health, industrial production and research. We could not dream, and we could not have a better dream to open this window to the future than the Telefónica Foundation, with whom we've been experimenting for a year, offering the best virtual reality experiences. We were able to find virtual Giselle. We could follow Alice in Wonderland with a soundtrack from Damon Alba. We could be on a parade on the first row. We could travel to the moon, or we could able to understand from the hand of the main characters. human trafficking in Mexico. So we are one of the leaders in virtual reality. Our institutions, the more prestigious ones like BBC, Royal Academy, Royal Shakespeare Comedy, or Royal Opera House, have developed projects that explore interconnection between technology and contents for citizenship. And we were able to find a similar echo in Spain, like the one in the United Kingdom, with studies and organizations who wanted to connect better with this industry that, no doubt, will continue growing rapidly. After an amazing year with snacks from XR Fest that we organized with Telefónica Foundation, it was about time to create this first festival. In order to do so, we gathered over 10 free available experiences for the public, several of them British and selected by Catherine Allen, director of Limited Immersive and winner of a BAFTA award. But we wanted to hear the main experts in the sector to be able to understand better the different scenarios for the future that we have right now. Robert McNicholas, founder of the collective Mass Relationship, will explain to us how they have included virtual reality in their work in order to create fascinating facilities that talk about the environment and then our world. In 4-Step from the BBC department will tell us how the main room in our houses will be in the future, and we'll see how borders between education and entertainment will disappear with the ability to learn and entertain from any surface in our place. All of this thanks to the Internet of Things. The director of a special project in the prestigious study of Rewind will describe how they work to explain how they develop in time and space, a live event thanks to virtual reality and augmented reality. Furthermore, and as a final thing, we will have Chagall, the artist who will provide a concert with themes composed just with movement from his body and got from his Mimu gloves. So this will happen in Zone and Half-West, and we will have him here in Madrid. Virtual reality is not just something for a few video games fans. It's an ongoing revolution that has not just technological challenges, but also ethical ones. It's a new way of seeing the world to understand it better, and it's an important challenge for directors of documentaries, journalists, and script writers, and also the roundtables with Spanish experts and keynotes. We will have 3 mornings of workshops with liminal immersives and BBC to be able to understand how it's the idea of a virtual reality, how that is produced, and how we get to a larger public. Summarizing a festival for professionals, but also for everyone who wants to start in this fascinating world. The British Council rule illustrates in a perfect manner our principles. It would facilitate mobility of talents and ideas that would allow us to tackle together with calm and criteria a future, sometimes a confused one. So we hope that you enjoy it, and thank you so much.
Hello, it's such a joy to be here and to come back to Madrid after being involved in the snacks last year. Bear with me while I get this set up. So today, it's brilliant to be here, and it's brilliant to be talking about XR as an art form. There is so much potential, and to see that the Foundation Telefónica and the British Council are engaging so seriously in this art form gives me so much happiness and joy. And it's been a real fantastic experience curating the pieces, working with the British Council that you can see here tonight and for the next few days as well. So today we'll start off by going back to basics and actually looking at what's different about XR, about what it is to be immersed, what does that really mean? Then we'll look at what's needed to unlock the creative potential of this medium, because let's be honest, this is really early days. And then we'll have a quick look at the XR industry, where it's at, and have a bit of a snapshot of the UK right now and look at its strengths and look at how it's developing. And then I will introduce the programme, which we, as I mentioned, we curated in partnership with the British Council. And so we'll be celebrating inspiring, incredible work from the UK. So I'll pull out some highlights. First of all, just a little bit of background on me to give some context. My career in virtual reality started back in 2015 when I produced 2 of the BBC's first VR experiences. I loved it. I put my heart and soul into that work. But to be honest, there was something that frustrated me, and that was our audiences. For the first piece were history enthusiasts, or at least who we wanted our audience to be. And for the second piece, the audience was young women. And what was frustrating is that we had this audience in mind, and we were creating work for these audience members, but the frustrating thing is they didn't have headsets yet. And we could have sat it out and just waited around. But me and my commissioner, Chris, at the time, instead we channeled this frustration and impatience into an idea for a business. And that is how Limina Immersive came about. We wanted to bridge this gap between content and audiences. Something that seems so simple, and when you look at other art forms like cinema, for instance, it's just part of our daily lives that you go to the flicks and, you know, see something at your local cinema or stream something at home. But we just don't have a culture like that at all around VR right now. But it's growing, and we're really proud to be a part of that growth. So that's how my background in VR started. I will give you a sneaky peek at actually how I discovered it later. Bit of an Easter egg. So this is the question, which I will come back to actually throughout this talk. But to be honest, what gets me out of bed in the morning, it's how can artistic, creative virtual reality be normalised to broad and diverse audiences who just reflect the population, to bring VR to the masses. So after we had this idea for Limina Immersive back when I was at the BBC. It came about, I decided, right, this is what I want to focus on, based in Bristol, and we went to several different, in fact about 10 different venues across the country. We worked in partnership with a variety of arts and culture venues to trial out a way that virtual reality could become normalised. So something that people might do as part of an evening out, that they might do with their friends or family. We went to just some snapshots here. We went to Picture House in London, Piccadilly Circus. We ran a VR festival there. We collaborated with the National Theatre of Scotland, and we took a VR festival there to Dundee. We went to Dublin as well. We went to Home in Manchester and ran a VR festival there. And every time we surveyed our audiences and asked them about this art form, we asked them, what did you like about it? What ideas for content did you have after having experienced about that? What were you nervous about? What things inspired you? And how do you feel after you've experienced this versus before? And we started to understand how to bridge that gap between content and audiences. Not just, yes, there's practically, you know, how do you create a space for it, but also what kind of content actually works for people in this context that we were creating. This is our latest development, which I'm really proud and excited by. Back in April, a few months ago, we launched the UK's first art space wholly dedicated to virtual reality. It's in the harbour side, it's in Bristol, and we've learned so much over the last few months that my view of content has expanded sort of exponentially. It can get overwhelming sometimes. But let's bring it back now, and let's look back to the basics about what is fundamentally different about XR. Okay, to start with, let's say what is XR? Let's define that. It often gets used as a term to define augmented reality, mixed reality, and virtual reality. I have to say, because my experience is mainly in virtual reality, I tend to use examples from that space, but it is an umbrella term. Now, I mentioned I was going to tell you about when I first discovered VR, and here's a little embarrassing moment, a recreation of when I thought I invented it. And the reason why I show you this picture is because I want to show just what is different about it, fundamentally. So it was my lunch break, I was at work, I was an app developer at the time, producing apps, educational apps for kids, and I thought, I wonder what would happen if I get my phone and I get a YouTube video of a landscape, like a panning shot, and maybe if I move my head around at the same rate, it might feel like I'm there. And I was kind of brainstorming apps for kids, maybe, and how we could create a sense of simulation, of being somewhere. It didn't really work, so I tried with my coat over, and I felt like I discovered something. And I went to my colleagues and I said, I think I've invented something. I just had a feeling of presence, that I was in this beautiful field and I wasn't even there. And my colleagues thought it was hilarious because they'd already heard of virtual reality and it had been around for quite a long time. And so for my birthday, a few weeks later, they bought me a Google Cardboard, which had just been released, which are those cardboard devices that you can put your phone into, kind of like what I was doing here, and simulate that sense of presence. And those first few nights, trying out lots of content from the App Store, lots of roller coaster demos and games in VR on this Google Cardboard, that's where I discovered the main difference. And here's something really obvious. It doesn't just happen in a rectangle. You feel like you're there. And this discovery, I suppose, something I want to share with you, and just look at it, I suppose, maybe like an alien would look at humans, right? So we spend so long situating our lives around these glowing rectangles. And what I realised from those nights just with this Google Cardboard was that that doesn't have to be the case. We spend almost half our waking hours looking at glowing rectangles, looking at this sort of media. If you were an alien and you were coming to Earth and you were looking at humans, you'd probably think that's really weird that we're spending so much time looking at them. And what virtual reality is, and augmented reality, is an opportunity to simulate presence and break out of the box. You are literally feeling like you're somewhere. So yes, it's digital media, but it's not hunched over a little glowing rectangle. So there's one thing that's different. It's getting outside the box. But now let's break that down further and look at what that really means. What is immersion? Well, what is immersive media? Well, at core, it involves immersion. Immersion is two things. I've broken this down with help from the International Society for Presence Research. They have a fantastic set of resources which I'd recommend breaking down what immersion is. You've got spatial immersion, which is feeling present in a space. Right now I am immersed in this beautiful building in the foundation of Telefónica. You could feel spatially immersed in VR, underwater, looking at a coral reef. You could be in a womb. You could be a fetus. That's something that we've screened before. You feel that sense of presence in a space. So that's one form of immersion. Another form of immersion is something, if you haven't done VR before, you've probably still experienced many times, is mental immersion. It's being absorbed. It's that maybe a narrative sense of immersion, getting your head into a really good book and not being able to put it down. Maybe it's coding or editing video and getting so into that task that you forget to eat, you forget to go to the toilet, you get really swept away in it. And that is mental immersion, or I call it absorption. You combine the two and you've got really good immersive media. Now let's look into this simulation element. I've mentioned the word simulation a few times, and this is another quality of immersive media. And I talked about this actually when I came last time, so I will just recap, which is that media that we were talking about when we're talking about absorption, for instance, books, or when we were talking about looking at those glowing rectangles, maybe TVs or your phone, often that sort of media is representative media. So a symbol represents something else, and your brain does the work of getting you into it. Simulative media is more like a video game is more simulative, or immersive theatre is more it's got more sense of simulation, and you could map different forms of media or different art forms along this continuum. The ultimate, the pinnacle for us people who work in the virtual reality sector is that ultimate simulation, and that's where we have things like the holodeck, for instance. So to sum it up, you combine simulation and immersion, and what do you get? You get experience, which has been bottled, metaphorically, and then scaled to hundreds, thousands, millions of people. You can take something from one person's imagination or a group of people's imagination, and you can share that sliver of a world with infinite amounts of people. So experience can be scaled. So this really isn't about the headset. It's about a whole new conceptual framework for delivering media, which is about doing rather than seeing. It's about experiencing rather than viewing. So there we go. Tried to boil it down. What is XR? Let's have a look at the toolkit next. So if you're thinking now, if I've maybe got you a bit interested in commissioning some XR or making some XR or just having a go yourself at home, what's your toolkit? What things can you play with for your audience? Well, I'll tell you some things that XR is particularly good at. Firstly, there's physiological responses from your audience. If you were standing up on a crane like that in real life, you'd probably be really, really scared. You'd probably feel sweat, you'd feel maybe heart palpitations or at least an increased heart rate. I know I'd be pretty nervous up there. But in virtual reality, the interesting thing is you still feel a kind of an echo of those physiological reactions. That sense is still there. And so you can recreate sets of physiological feelings in your audience. And there's a lot of potential there for mood management, for learning by feeling, not just learning by doing. Then there's intimacy. When somebody looks at you in virtual reality, say I was in a 360 video where somebody was having a conversation with me and they were looking at me in the eye as they were talking and then they smiled, I would find it really hard not to smile at them back, because you have these instinctive human responses to other people, and virtual reality can play on that, and augmented reality can do that too. You have this sense of another person, and it's really hard to get away from the fact that they're not real. Interesting as well to look at this in regard to the uncanny valley too. But crucially, something worth remembering if you are thinking of making immersive media, that put a human in there and you've got a really good opportunity to create engagement, especially with eye contact. And you could even work towards developing something like what a psychologist would call a parasocial relationship, where you feel like you actually know them. Another something that you can have, an element for your toolkit up your sleeve, is the ability to put your audience in somebody else's shoes, or at least give the feeling of doing that for a certain period of time. So this is my friend Jane's piece. It's a still from it called Dancing with Myself. And she has epilepsy, which she got from a brain injury she had a few years ago. And she made this experience because she wanted to show her doctor what a night out was like for her when she knows at any point she might have an epileptic fit. You have this interior monologue where she's talking about her experiences. She's narrating how it feels, that she can feel it coming on. She feels nervous because the friend that she's with, he's not aware at all. And then it happens and she doesn't remember it. Now, experiencing that from her perspective, it's like a shortcut, really, a mental exercise to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And these sorts of experiences, there's been quite a lot of these empathy-centered VR experiences that have been made, but they do work. So it's worth looking that up. And then finally, something else up your sleeve is memory. Now remember, when you're making a virtual reality experience, when your audience member does that experience, they're much more likely to remember it than if they were, say, looking at a flat image. There's several studies that have been done on this. There's a really good Stanford one, actually, with children swimming with orcas, if you want to, as a reference point for this, if you want to look it up more. But essentially, when people do virtual reality, it triggers their spatial memory, And because memories tend to be geotagged, it places it somewhere, and that means it's easier to recall afterwards. So you'll notice a theme we keep coming back to is doing rather than viewing. And so if you are doing as an audience member rather than just seeing, that means it may have more of an impact, not just on how you remember it, but actually how you feel about yourself afterwards. I mean, what are we if not a collection of our own life experiences? And if you're giving people experiences, you're creating something that may impact their sense of self, their sense of an identity. And all of this toolkit and the impact on audiences' identities, what does it equate to if we zoom out a bit? New genres, new formats. So think about the development of TV, for instance, or film. We've got this emergence of formats and genres that are now commonplace. So the horror film, the rom-com, or in television, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, for instance. We will see this emerge in immersive media. And this is the result of a study that was government funded that Limina did last year, where we identified the top emerging immersive genres and formats. And this is what we came out with. A few highlights: activity simulator, access all areas. You get to go somewhere where you wouldn't usually have access to that space or that time. A fantasy trip. These all have significant potential as the equivalent of the next, say, horror or rom-com. Let's now think about it. Okay, yes, there is opportunity here as an art form, but that's not really, yes, we can get excited, but that's not really the full answer. That's not, I don't want to just inspire you and then leave, because there's actually quite a lot of jobs to be done in order to turn this, not just from potential, but into a genuine sector with genuine audience members. We're really early days. So I'm going to briefly summarise what we need to do in order to unlock this creative potential that we've talked about. This, you may be familiar with the technology adoption life cycle. This is an adaptation of it by Geoffrey Moore from the early 90s, where he identified that with lots of technology, actually, it's really difficult to cross this chasm, this gap, from early adopters to the early majority. And I know this was early 90s when he put this chasm in, but we still see it time and time again with new emerging technologies. And we're seeing it right now with VR. The stage we're at is we're trying to cross this chasm from early adopters to the early majority. And in fact, events like XR Fest really do play a part in helping us do this. So that's the stage we're at. In order to cross it, in my opinion, we need two things. Obviously, we need an audience, and we need a broad audience, which is more representative of society. And if we want to make content that appeals to them, then we need a diverse workforce, so that people can make content that is appealing, and we're more likely to get what they call in startup terms a product market fit. This is what we need. The state that we're in at the moment is that 23% of, this is UK, US figures, 23% of people in the UK and US have tried VR versus actually the same for augmented reality, 23%. You also see there's quite a big gender gap. So 30% of men have experienced virtual reality versus only 16% of women. This gender gap is actually getting wider every year. When I see statistics like this, it gets increasingly more depressing. So then again, I come back to the point that events like XR Fest and the incredible work that's been done to make these few days happen is so important in order to broaden that audience. This is where the UK is at right now. According to PwC, we've got about 9% of the global market share. According to Immerse UK and Nesta, we have over 1,000 specialist XR companies. That's companies where the majority of their turnover comes from immersive media. PwC also forecasts that by 2021, UK will be fastest growing and largest VR industry in the EMEA region. The hotspots, the places where I pay particular attention to in my job, are Brighton, London and Bristol, because they're particularly creative in the output of immersive media, and there is a bit of a thriving audience scene around that as well. And we have funding from the Arts Council with the Creative XR scheme, with the University Research Councils also provide funding, and then there's of course the government, as part of the industrial strategy, have this £33 million fund for immersive media called Audiences of the Future, and that programme is ongoing at the moment, and we're going to start to see some really interesting results from organisations ranging from Aardman to the Royal Shakespeare Company to shopping centres across the country. So things are happening, and it's a pretty exciting time to be working in the sector. I want to conclude by probably the most important part of the evening, which is introducing the programme. I'm so proud of the work that the British Council and Limina have done to put this programme together, to demonstrate some of the best of British virtual reality. Here, first piece I want to tell you about is Make Noise. This is by the BBC, team I used to work with when I was there, and Anagram, a Bristol-based company. And it's about the suffragettes and the history of the suffragettes through archive audio recordings that have been brought to life in this beautiful kind of surreal fantasy space. It's super empowering to do. It requires you, the audience, to make noise in order for it to work. I'd recommend you having a go at that one. Then here we go is Magic Butterfly, which is a virtual reality performance of the incredibly well-known opera from Puccini. The Welsh National Opera and a VR company called Rewind made this experience, and they used motion capture suits, performers actually wearing motion capture suits in order to record it. So it's the question here I'd sort of pose to you when you experience this is, how does it feel? Does it feel like a performance? Do you feel that sense of liveness? Then we've got another piece from a BBC, but this was made with BBC News. This is a series called Congo that they made recently, where you get to go to these, absolutely beautiful spaces, but also learn about the trouble that the country has experienced. It really plays to the theme of taking you to these places that you probably won't visit. And many people wouldn't have the opportunity to visit these places. And something that our audiences say in our venue, we've had thousands of people through at Limina now, they often say what they really want to do with VR, especially when it's their first time, is go to places that they wouldn't usually get the opportunity to go to, if not ever. Maybe, hey, it would save some carbon as well from our air miles with this approach. Then, this is what I'm particularly excited about. It's the artist, she's called Rachel McLean. She's a well-known visual artist in her own right. This is I think it's her first VR experience that she's made. It's called I'm Terribly Sorry, and it plays with this theme of dystopia and Britishness, that kind of tacky British tourism aesthetic. It has a subtext of Brexit, and that's why personally I think it's an incredible time to be making this work and to also be sharing it here. The final one I want to show you is Sanctuaries of Silence, which is a VR experience where you get to go to one of the USA's last remaining rainforests. It's in Washington State, and there's only a few places in the world now where you can't hear any sounds from humans, and this is one of those places. So you experience the sounds of the forest and the sights, but it's recorded so beautifully with binaural audio that you really do feel that sense of immersion. And there's an archive element to this, which we may lose this place. So one of the themes that it explores is the necessity to conserve what we have. And in this case, sound, which is a very intangible but important asset, the value of silence. So on that note, I want to say thank you, and I will wrap up. I hope that you enjoy XR Fest, and I hope that you enjoy experiencing the content as much as we've enjoyed curating it. It really is fantastic to be bringing this high caliber work to you that explores these really unique qualities of immersive media. So I hope you enjoy the festival, and thank you very much.
Hola.
Hello. Everything is ready. Andres has introduced me already, more or less. I'm Elena Gonzalez. I'm responsible for the fest. And I hear myself with kind of an echo. I'm talking to the technicians, but I'll keep on talking. So just a very brief overview of the program. But first, I would like to thank everyone who participated on the fest, because to set these 4 days up, that will go through quite fast, but a lot of people participated. So I just wanted to go through the British Council, of course. Thank you, Catherine, for being here. Thank you, Ludovic, for all of this that we started last year with the snacks, as Catherine remember, and it finally happened after such a long time. Thanks to the update team as well, which, as you know, are our partners in everything related to immersive realities, and who are also the ones with whom we are working on the space on floor number 4. Sana Pequera, Silvia Smooth, Lucas Odiosi, and of course Oscar, who's looking at me more or less. And of course, I would like to thank the people from the house. If you allow me, we'll just be half a minute, because it's a ton of us, and this would not be possible without my colleagues from programming, Laura Hernandez, Silvia Arroyo, Sara Cabañas, the team from production, Luis San Segundo, Irene, Edis Martinez, and Solis Sanchez, because I'm mixing those names every day, and Susana Perez Aruca, and of course the technicians, interpreters from sign languages, translators who are back there, all the staff from the room who's providing support for the experiences and all events, communication, legal administration, tons and tons of people to whom I will ask an applause. Thank you. And now quite quick through the program, because it has already been kind of mentioned. XR Fest has 3 different parts with our workshops, meetings and experiences. Workshops will happen starting tomorrow, Thursday and Friday from 12 to 2 p.m. is how to do storytelling, how XR happens, and how to impact your audience. And as you see, these are professionals both from the Immersive and BBC, the one providing the workshops. The meetings will have kind of a similar format every day at 7 p.m. First, we will have a conference from British experts, and then a round table with experts from the national landscape, and then on Wednesday we have news storytelling. Thursday we talk about education, and you have the people participating here. And Friday it will be about art and creation. Fridays is the last day. We'll have a performance, a closing performance by Chagall. Finally, experiences that Catherine has already introduced, the British ones, but we have 12, 13 experience selected between Catherine and the Fundación team, talking about this, entertainment, culture, ecology, denouns, feminism, creativity, and many of them had award or presented in very important international festivals. And the 2 national ones we have are from Studio Futura Summer Camp, Lucas, if I'm wrong, correct me, and Marina Nunez and Fallen Angels, Angeles Caídos. So you have the program here. It will be available on the website and of course on social media. With XR Fest, you can find all the information you want. Without further ado, and to finish, we are going to have the performance, the augmented body. Allow me to read it because I don't want to make a mistake. So it's a performance by Alfredo Miralles, who's a dancer and cultural manager who participated in engineers Javier Gorostiza and Javier Picasas. The augmented body is one of the results of the platform Arte and New Technologies from the University Carlos III from Madrid. And this project is about having a dialogue between both disciplines, arts and technologies, in a horizontal hierarchy where both of them are part of the scene with interaction in real time. So here you have Alfredo Miralles.
Before you turn 11, you'll realize that there is evil in the world, and you'll have to decide between fighting it or living your life on the sidelines. One of the two options will turn you into a hero for some, the other into a hero for others. Because there are no good or bad. There are only heroes who do what they can. It's not easy being a superhero today. It's possible that you have not discovered it yet, that you think that you are like all the others. But your superpower awaits you. The world needs you. Humanity needs to be safe. We need to be safe from you. If you don't have a superpower, you're a threat. When you turn 11, you'll have learned that evil was not out. The only struggle with meaning is the one you keep with yourself. It's like surviving. You can never win. The victory is always momentary. The only victory is to keep fighting, to continue running the risk of losing. The reward is scarce, as if the prize of the brave ones was to continue to be afraid. I was also scared when I knew all this. At the age of 11, you can't be a child anymore. It's the only age at which the important things in life can be done. I'm brave, but what if my only superpower is to be aware of my fragility? Who would need me? Would someone shout my name for help? Maybe I'm not one of those superheroes that save people. Maybe it's like my superpower only serves to save myself. You will no longer be able to say that you didn't know it. You no longer keep that innocence. Please, don't believe that your hands end in your fingers. Feel as your skin is permeable and the air around you rubs inside. Don't think that your leg is your longest joint. Remember your eyes that reach the horizon. Please live in your subtle bodies. Discover your weightlessness, which also belongs to you. Remember when you knew how to fly. Remember when you knew how to fly. Please, don't think of your feet as the end of your body. Feel the impact of your presence in the depths of the earth. Be your wings and your roots. Because if the goal is not out, if the path is inward, what else is lost in space-time? And if my body doesn't limit me, and I am one with the universe, how do I know who I am? Where do I go? And where do I come from? How do I know who I am? Where do I go? And where do I come from?
No se me quitan. Hola.
Hello. Now, okay. So now you can have something to eat.
Pesada.